Hello there, and welcome to the Total Woman Show, the show designed especially for you. We're glad to have you with us today because we've got a great topic, and we talked about this last week, so I'm glad you're here this week to tune in to the topic of women helping other women, myth or reality. Well, we're going to talk about that today, why women don't help other women. So I'm here with my co-host, Coach Allison, health coach, Patti Cotton, executive coach, and Jodi Tucker, leadership coach. And we are all here today to chime in on why women don't help other women. This is really something. And you know, I'm glad you're here. Get your pads, get your pencils, because you want to take notes on this show for sure. You know, for a long, long time, we've talked about this, and I think it's just not endemic to our culture. But this would be for many different cultures, how women don't treat each other very nicely. And women treating each other badly has played out for a long time between women at work, women in friendships, and throughout their lives. And so there's a woman who, she is the author, and her name is Joan Rosenberg, and she's a noted psychologist and co-author of a book called Mean Girls, Mean Women. And I'm telling you that, you know, I'm seeing that now with some of the teenagers I'm working with. I mean, they're so mean to each other. Oh my goodness. And so these mean girls grow up oftentimes to be mean women. So today, stay with us because we're going to talk deeply about this subject because it's really near and dear to my heart about why women don't help other women. Not to say that there aren't some women who are helping other women. We're not saying that, please, but that we know. No, I don't want anybody to write any nasty letters to me or emails to any of us, but to let the record show that we're to talk about why women don't help each other more. Okay?
Yeah.
So,
I think there are a couple of things that come to my mind right away, and one is women don't know how to help each other sometimes because they haven't known how to help themselves.
Okay.
And so they will rush to the rescue. They might be terribly codependent in a relationship and not know what to do with the other woman if the other woman is confident and self-assuming. But then you have the other dynamic, which is maybe the queen bee syndrome. Where you're so insecure that no other woman can get near you in hierarchy, in relationships or otherwise, because that's too threatening, because you're not confident in yourself.
Right.
So there are a couple of scarcity modes. One is because you don't know how, and the other is because you don't know yourself and don't recognize another person as having just as much recognition and acknowledgement in the world as you.
You're so true. And I'm wondering how this plays out in other arenas, because I know, and you resonated with something with me. I resonated with the queen bee syndrome. Would you explain that? Because a lot of people may not know what that means.
So the queen bee syndrome is this. As a woman ascends in a leadership role or another position of authority, she needs emotionally to be the only female around, because when we look ahead to leadership, we don't see many women in leadership roles. So it seems to us that there's already a scarcity mode. When that happens and we ascend in leadership or in a certain position, it's frightening for us to have other women get close to us in hierarchy, because that means our position may be threatened. Just like the bumblebees, there is only room for one queen bee. The rest are drones. And so as another woman approaches, that's very threatening, because you don't know how to play that way. You don't know how to accept other people's gifts, especially the women. And Jodi, you probably run into this a lot in your leadership coaching. I don't know. Do you?
Absolutely. It reminds me of a presentation that I heard recently at an independent TED Talk event, where there was a documentary filmmaker who was studying women in the DJ industry. And she talked about exactly that, about how she was far more comfortable being the only woman in a room of men than she ever was if she had to collaborate or work with even one more woman in the room. Just add one more, and it shifted the whole thing. And it makes me think about that women are sometimes the hardest critics of other women. And so we have a hard time forgiving ourselves in our own inadequacy, and we use that as the other women become a mirror for the issues that we struggle with in our own selves. So we are quick to criticize or quick to point out those things in other women, because heaven forbid we have to look at that in our own realities. And I mean, I'm the oldest of 4 girls. There was a lot of women in my
Mine for the bathroom.
growing up. And that's exactly it. We competed for resources.
Sure.
I mean, it was 1 bathroom, 4 girls. Come on, it was get going, get out. And I think in the workplace, we view women as competition for resources.
Right.
And even in some of the parenting circles that I'm involved in, it's really interesting, the hierarchy of the mother in those environments. I mean, so to be a woman when you bring your kids to a school for the first time and you pull up into the parking area, holy cow, it's not just about your kid making friends. You are at the scrutiny of the soccer mom.
Sure.
Critique. And that's a very intimidating place to be. I had a hard time with that. I had a hard time showing up at pickup at my daughter's school looking like all that and a bag of chips. I showed up like I'd worked hard all day. I don't know what you girls did all day. I worked hard.
So I'm not here being the clown queen.
So, I showed up looking exactly how I felt. I'm the frazzled entrepreneur who has 20 minutes to get my kid and get back to the office.
Right.
I didn't have the luxury of standing around in my yoga pants. I had to get going. So we tend to criticize, and even doesn't that sound very critical of me? That we tend to criticize other women very, very easily.
We do, and we'll. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Allison.
Oh, well, sorry. Well, what I wanted to say is that when I was in corporate, as an engineer, the truth is that there are not that many older women than women who are older than I am. Female engineers who are older than I am in the industry right now.
You're the pioneer.
Well, I would say that, but I mean, maybe like 10 years older.
The trendsetter.
They're not that many. And one time, I was working at this one company. I was number 2 woman in the entire company. They had a few hundred. Well, it's not a big company, but a few hundred, 800 people in the company. Mm-hmm. And she was an associate, and I had just barely made a project manager. And so when I was in this leadership training, they said, well, get yourself a mentor, right? So immediately I thought, well, maybe I'll go to her, because she knew who I was, and we had talked before. And so, but we were working at different offices. We're not physically near, you know?
Yeah.
And so I asked her if she would be interested in, having this mentor, relationship. And she didn't come out right out, say no, but she was like, well, I don't know if I can fit that in my schedule right now. And I understand that, because she was very busy, because I was too.
Yeah.
But she was 60 miles away, and I would have traveled that way.
Sure.
But it never happened.
Yeah.
I asked her a number of times, and it just didn't materialize.
Right.
And I mean, really, in my personal life, that was really the only time that I couldn't really connect when I reached out like that. And most of the time, for me, working with other women, it was just very collaborative effort, and that has worked very well. This is the one time, and I don't know what her intentions were. I mean, she was really busy. I mean, she really was. But I don't think it was all that malicious or anything. It's just that she was not in a position to make that a priority for her.
Right. Right.
So
And I was sitting with a woman-owned wealth advisory firm down in San Diego the other day, and I was gathering some research for a report that I'm writing on 3 levels of leadership for women. And I said to her, what do you find is the most difficult thing that stands in between women helping women? And she said, I don't know, and this was an interesting story. She did not answer the question, but check this out. She said, women just need to figure it out for themselves. And I said, talk more about that. I know.
Whoa.
Check this out. She said, now, I had to make it by myself. I have an assistant who's likely to become an investor, a wealth advisor at some point, but she's expecting a child. And I don't know her intention. She's probably going to go out. Maybe she'll decide to stay at home. Maybe she wants to stay in the workforce. But she has not come to me to express that she would like to remain viable in my firm. And if she did, and she came up with a creative way to do it, I would say yes. And I said to her, Sandy, you're older and wiser than she. Why don't you offer the advice
Reach out to her.
No, she needs to figure that out. We all had to figure it out by ourselves. I thought, oh my word, that's a problem.
Well, I have to say, along those lines, when I was coming along in my era, and in defense of that kind of attitude, that's what I came up against. Women who, and I remember I'm in education, so women who were at higher levels in education, there are very few at that level. And those who were, in particular women of color,
Yes.
they didn't have time to mentor me
They had to work
because
twice
they
as
were so
hard.
busy trying to cover their back, their
Right.
sides, their
Right.
front, because they were in a
Absolutely.
male-dominated era and profession, education. And so I realized, because I reached out to a person and she really didn't have the time. And I was so appalled, and slightly hurt,
Sure.
because there were only two of us in this whole
Yeah.
arena
Yeah.
at that time.
Similar
And
to
I
us.
mean, but out of that came this resolve in me that I would help women and mentor
Yeah.
and give them support. Would not maybe wait for them to ask me, but to go to them. And I had an opportunity to do that when I became the first female assistant dean for a large educational institution. And I reached out to everyone. You know, and so I think a lot of it is what I think that many organizations are lacking, and women, and that's that compassion. And so we start to look at more people having more compassion for the organization. And the question you might want to ask her, how do people feel when they're in your presence?
I gave a talk shortly after that and looked out, and she was in the audience. And I disguised the conversation enough that nobody could figure out who she was, but she would recognize herself. And she came to me afterwards and said, you know, ever since that came out of my mouth, I've been bothered by it. And hearing you
Oh,
say
she
that
remembered
today
it?
says that I need to go and talk to her. Because we can't adopt the same attitudes that a patriarchal society has dictated. That was classically the way that men mentored men. Well, get out there and swim. Whoever survives rises. We have adopted that to some extent, which is too bad, because we think that we have to do that in order to survive in a male-dominated world, in corporate. That's not true. The feminine traits that we consider soft traits are the very strong ones that mentor, nurture, and support success.
Absolutely. And actually, if we're moving towards a new era, as it results in organizational leadership and organizational development and climate, it's going to play out with people and compassion. That organization that has a compassionate journey into what I call the soul of a business. And
Yeah, the most successful organizations are not ones that aspire to financial supremacy. They're the ones that move forward with initiatives that are firmly based in their values. And they don't, and they make decisions based on that at every turn.
there should be joy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Joy in the work environment.
Yeah.
There should be women who are excited to mentor other women, rather than this competitiveness. I think we make ourselves competitive. I mean, we set up these barriers and all these things, rather than being inclusive. I don't know why women, there's a book I read about women's inhumanity to women, and I started talking about this. Actually, I gave a big speech to the medical association, the big medical association in San Diego, and I had all the doctors' wives, and I let them have it. I've never had a speech where, really, this has never happened to me, where the audience, there were 600 women, 600 or 700 women there, and you could feel a pin drop, and it was like plowing hard ground. I don't know if you've ever spoken and you could feel you're plowing hard ground. And I could feel the sweat falling off my brow. And we'll be right back after this commercial, and I'll tell you what happens, so stay tuned for the Total Woman Show. Thank you for listening, and we'll be right back. Hello, and welcome back to the Total Woman Show. I'm glad you're back, and I hope you are waiting to hear the next part of the story. I am captivating everybody on these in the audience. I'm standing there like I'm plowing hard ground, trying to get to these people, 600 women, and they're looking mean. And I'm talking about women's inhumanity to women. And I'm really, really going at it about how you criticize behind their backs and how you make all these snide comments about them. And you sneer and you say, oh, that's a lovely dress. Oh, it'd be great on you if you lost a little more weight. You know, little comments like that. I said, but what happened at the end of that was I had a standing ovation. I couldn't believe it. I was sweating bullets. I am not kidding.
Wow.
And I had a standing ovation, and people were lining up to come and tell me that was me. So what happened what was the response when you gave this speech to the audience? And this woman, you know.
So I did. I gave a talk shortly after I talked with the colleague. And she recognized herself, even though I disguised it so no one else would know. And she came up and she said, you know, ever since that came out of my mouth, I've been thinking about what I said and really, really having to face myself to see what I need to do differently. Because if we don't, then who?
Yeah.
Great,
Exactly.
great.
Who will?
But you know, have you guys thought about that? A lot of women don't know how to mentor other women.
Yeah.
You know what?
They
That's
just
exactly
frankly don't know how.
what was going through my mind is that so we're talking about mentorship, and when I think about the colleagues that I don't, you know, necessarily think they were particularly nurturing when it came to other women in their industries. I think the idea of needing and valuing mentorship was foreign to them.
Yeah.
And it may, you know, so why is that certainly in my practice, it seems to me that women have a hard time accepting that maybe they need help.
Yeah.
And that's not a sign of being less than. You know, so if a woman goes to a coach or goes to it's
That I'm not good enough.
Yeah, an admission of not being good enough. Yeah.
What
Not
I
up to
also
snuff,
see
the
is
bar.
that women do not feel that they have much to offer,
Yes.
so they don't
Yeah.
help.
Really?
That's
Yeah,
the
I see that.
self-esteem.
But
I see that.
I
Yeah,
find
yeah.
a lot of women say I
Yeah.
don't have the time. I think Patti has
Well,
said this
that's-
earlier
yeah.
about, well, I'm just too busy and I just don't know how I can find the time to do this. You know, I'm working 8+, and you know, have you thought about
Many
the
reasons why.
But have you
Yeah.
thought about the
Yeah, it's
organizations too, the
complicated.
company organizations that have changed? People are not working 8 to 5 anymore.
No, but the interesting change or shift that's happening in leadership there's lots of different concepts of leadership. When you look at some of the more relevant forerunners of how we see leadership today, the attributes of a leader are far more feminine in nature now than they've ever been.
I know.
mean, when
I
we talk
realize
about
that.
transformational leadership, servant leadership, values-based leadership,
Servant leadership.
yeah,
Servant
those are
leadership, yeah.
those
Those
are some of the forerunners in what is making organizations successful today. In understanding what that is and infiltrating their entire infrastructure with those concepts. In different industries that are typically dominated by women, or by men, especially in the technology fields,
Right.
we are seeing more and more women take positions of leadership. In fact, startups are in North America, the majority of startups are driven by women. They're women-based or owned and driven organizations.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the initiatives that are out there right now are really informed by a larger body than women than we've ever seen in the marketplace before. And the way that we integrate and engage leadership as women actually gives us a leg up on the things that we want to do in our professions.
Right.
They seem to come more naturally to women. Like
But-
the idea
yeah.
of serving
But, you know,
others is a
I'm thinking, and this is all good information, but I'm thinking for out there for the millennials, I don't see this sort of camaraderie and helping one another happen with our millennials. Now I keep bringing that up because we're going to bring some of them on as guests on the show to get their viewpoints, because I think it's very important to look at where we are today with women. You know, and I know this, I may be digressing a moment, but I was really shocked last week to find out that 64% of women entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs in America are women. But
It's
only,
a very large
but
number.
only 34% are profitable.
Well, and we
I
are
mean,
earning,
that was shocking.
well, listen, we are earning an average of 150,000 a year as entrepreneurs, as opposed to our male counterparts, who are pulling in half a
Oh,
million.
absolutely.
So it's 150, 500.
So, yeah.
But how do we understand that number? Because
Yeah.
what that tells me is that we are just in a different place in learning how to be there.
Right.
We will get
Yes.
there. We will
Yes.
absolutely get there. And the interesting thing about millennials is, and we're talking about people who are entering the workforce or industry positions who are under the age of 35. You know, this is the generation of the helicopter mom. So they've never had to do things like time management on their own. They've never been asked to do that. So when they enter into positions and suddenly their employers don't want to take on that role of mentorship, there's a gap there.
Right.
Because it's not that they don't have what it takes to be very successful in their positions. What the problem is that a lot of business owners don't know how to capture the intellectual capital of a millennial.
Absolutely. Right.
And actually
Absolutely. I know
pull that
that.
and draw that forward.
Right. I
How
know.
do you do that?
Yeah.
And so, and I've sat with some really rigid thinkers that own businesses, and one comes to mind where he had this absolutely brilliant marketing 24-year-old employee. And was saying to me, you know what, everybody else, when I give them a project, they know they have to just get it done. I just give them the I don't want to have to babysit him. And I had to say to him, you're going to have to get out of that mindset because
Right.
you have
need help.
in your possession one of the most talented individuals that I've had yet to encounter with a marketing background. You cannot teach that kind of talent and passion, but you can teach time management, communication, project management. Those things you can teach. You are in your 50s. You can teach him that stuff. If you let him walk out that door, he will be a success in somebody else's business because somebody else will harness that talent.
and
that's
develop
the
it.
key with millennials, is to understand that those skills for a large part of their lifetime weren't a part of what they needed to put in play.
Right.
It wasn't their
Exactly.
problem.
Right.
It was their parents' problem.
Right.
Now it's their problem, and what we have to do is understand that needs nurturing.
Well, especially for the women, because the female
Yes.
millennials are leaving after 12 to 18 months in any
Yes.
job
Yeah.
because they are looking for that model of female leadership and they don't see it. And they're saying to themselves, so we've done several surveys, they're saying, there's probably no room for me to advance. I'm just leaving.
I'm out of
Right,
here.
and they'll hop.
Yeah.
They'll hop
They'll
from place
hop.
to place to
Right,
place,
yeah, right.
and that is the employment trend of a millennial.
Yes.
And it can be for them a rather healthy experience to figure out where they belong, and
Sure.
when they land, they land and they stick.
Yeah.
But they
Yeah.
will jump around.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but in that situation, I see a great need for emotional intelligence, both from the
Yeah.
leadership
Yeah.
and the
That's
younger
a good
people,
point.
you know,
Yeah.
younger generation as well. Because
Sure.
why are they there at this job, and what are they really looking for?
Yeah.
But there's a
Yeah.
lot of emotion, because we're all human, right? The emotion involved, and behind those motives, and how they feel, and how they see their future
Right.
in that group. So
Yeah.
emotional intelligence and servant leadership, all that is just kind of comes together in
It
a
does,
healthy
it really
example.
does.
Yeah.
But
Right.
I have to get back to the point, though, of seeing just some bad behavior between women, whether they're millennials or whether they're, you know,
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
another generation, and it continues. Someone has talked about the crab mentality, you know, trying to get out of the barrel and others.
Yeah.
And Sandra Kircher said, you know, if women knew their collective power, we
Right.
could remake this world.
Exactly.
You know, and I use that statement in Kenya because they kept asking me, why do you keep coming back to Kenya and riling up the women? I said, because one day the women will be running this country. Well, look at us now. We may be for the first time looking at a female leader.
Sure.
And we won't be the first nation that's done that, but think of a major country. I just had to bring that up because when we talk about women supporting one another, and not just because we support you just because you happen to be a female, but it's really providing that kind of support when we know that you're capable, we know that you're qualified. Because you know what? I think I'm trying to help the young people understand if somebody has something that you want, get with them and say, look,
That's
can
right.
we get together? Can we go to
Yes.
lunch?
Yes.
Because I'd like to
Absolutely.
know
Yeah.
what you do, and I watched you in action.
Yeah.
Can you help me? And I think that kind of attitude rather than the jealousy. But it gets back to something, Patty, you said earlier. You have to really know yourself.
You do.
You-
You have
yeah.
to
You
be
just
secure
have to
in
be
yourself.
Yeah,
secure
that's right.
It's
in
security,
yourself. You
Yeah.
cannot give what
Yeah.
you do not have. You know, and so it's even with the airlines, so they'll put your oxygen mask on first.
Yeah.
Well, so ladies, we got to put the oxygen mask on us first. We've got to get ourselves together. You got to feel good about who you are. And you know, write down some stuff. I have ladies write down on a piece of paper, who do you think you are? And I think we said it earlier on, or maybe another show, about it's not about your career. That doesn't define who you are, but who are you really? And then can we make just a small step of reaching out to a sister friend?
Right.
No
Yeah,
matter what
absolutely.
nationality,
Yeah,
what color,
absolutely.
you know, if she's green and, you know, has
Yes,
green hair.
yes.
And we've got to get out of this, I think, stereotyping people and not wanting to cross-pollinate. Is that the word I should be saying? But to mix and to mingle. And we need to do more of that. I'd
Absolutely.
really like to see much more of that.
Because
we're
there's a
gonna-
lot, with that insecurity, there's a lot of judgment that goes on. It's like,
Yes.
Oh, for sure.
some people don't like
Yes.
skinny people because they're skinny, or some people don't like, you know,
Yeah.
people with large,
Yeah.
you know, so many children, or they have one children, or they're married or single. I mean, there are many things that we make these judgments on, and it's just so quick, and the judgments seem to last. They don't go away very easily,
No.
right?
Yeah,
and
no.
so that's the unfortunate part.
Yeah.
So I have a tip for the women out there who are working in the workplace or in any kind of relational network, and that is this. A lot of times we wait for someone to get a mentor or to be a mentor to somebody. But let's all be sponsors. And here's what I mean by that. A sponsor is a mentor on steroids. A sponsor is someone who has your back when you're not in the room. If somebody criticizes, let's say, you know, Allison decides she's going to be my sponsor. Somebody's in a room and they criticize Patty. Allison's quick to say, you know what? I really appreciate Patty's expertise in XYZ. I'm not quite sure that you have that right. Or I do that for Jodi, and so on and so forth. We need to be sponsors of each other.
You know what
That's a
that really
really
is
good
called?
idea.
You know what that's called?
Yeah.
I learned this years ago. It's called forming a cabal.
There you go.
All right, you remember
Love
that?
it, love
All
it,
right,
love
a
it.
cabal.
Yes,
C-A-B-A-L.
absolutely.
And what that means
Powerful,
is anytime your name
powerful.
is mentioned, I'm going, they said, do you know Coach Allison? Of course. Oh my God, she's fantastic.
go.
She is just incredible. You know,
Yes.
she's written this book called Life-Work Balance, okay? Then you say, Patti Cotton. Oh my God, Patti Cotton, you know her? She's incredible. That is a cabal, and you watch and see what happens. I absolutely tried it with a colleague. Both of us shot up like this. I am not kidding. Our careers took off.
Wow.
There you go.
Two women supporting each other.
Exactly.
And we didn't really like each other at first. No, I don't mean that. No, what I'm saying is I think when we first came, you know, it was like that little, she's bright, she's the UCLA, I'm the USC, And so it was like, I said, why don't we form a cabal? And I learned about that in my course at USC when I was doing organizational development. It's called cabal.
Yeah.
And actually, you can do it. You should do that. So I like that. I mean, the sponsor's great, but the cabal, we have a cabal, do we not?
I think
Yes,
we
we do.
We
We got a
that's
cabal.
where we are right now.
And
Yes.
I love it. I love it. I love you guys. I really, really do. You guys are so
too.
special and precious.
thank you.
So we're going to wrap up the show today, and I just want to thank you. I hope you've gotten something out of the show today. That I want you to stay strong, stay encouraged, do the best you can, just being you. Reach out to another female and just say, I care. Take the time just to say, I care. You know, Madeleine Albright said in a conference, women, a few years ago, she said, any woman who's mean to another woman, there's a special place in hell for her.
That's a sign
So
off.
anyway, I want to thank you for watching the Total Woman Show. And remember, tune in every week for more on Transformation Success TV. Be sure to bookmark the Total Woman Show. This is the show, Transformation for Success, one step at a time. And thank you for being with us today. Remember, next week we'll be right back with another hot topic for you. Thank you.